Yo, what's going on, guys? My name is Alex, and today we are going to be ranking every single Western Conference team going into this next season. We got a lot of teams to talk about, so let's just go ahead and get started. I do want to describe, though, what each tier means. So for our Sigma tier, these are going to be teams that I think are title contenders, at least coming out of that conference. The good but not great tier are going to be some pretty solid playoff teams, but again, I don't think they reach the edge to the point where I think they'll make it to the finals. Then we have our play-in party tier, which are teams that I think are going to be in the play-in from the 7th to 10th seed. Then we have the end tier, and the end tier is just going to be teams that aren't absolutely trash, but also aren't that great and probably won't make it into the play-in tournament just because I don't think they're that great. And then we have the Gulag tier, which is the absolute worst teams in the conference. So with that out of the way, let's get started. And we're going to go in order with what the teams are presented to us. And we have the Dallas Mavericks. And for me, I'm going to put the Dallas Mavericks into the play-in party. So the Dallas Mavericks did end up getting Grant Williams and Seth Curry. They still have Luka and Kyrie on this team. I think they have some pretty solid pieces on this team. They did actually end up losing Christian Wood just a couple of days ago, but he honestly wasn't really playing all too much for them anyway, coming off the bench, and the Mavericks didn't really value him very highly. But even with that being said, I just don't think the Mavericks made significant enough moves to truly put them into this good but not great tier as a solidified playoff team, just because I do still think that they are lacking a lot of defensive talent on this team. They did have to trade a good amount of it just to get Kyrie Irving. And yes, a duo of Kyrie and Luka is going to be very good. And I think offensively, this Mavericks team is going to be great. But defensively is really where I think they struggle. And I think that's what's going to hold them back from honestly being a solidified playoff team, which is why I have them into this play-in spot. Next up, we have the Denver Nuggets. And I think for the Denver Nuggets, I'm going to put them into this Sigma tier. Yes, the Denver Nuggets bench is definitely not the same. They lost Bruce Brown, and depending on how you felt about Jeff Green, that's also a crucial bench piece that they lost. And coming off their bench, they're going to have freaking Reggie Jackson, a bunch of rookies, and DeAndre Jordan at the center. The bench is not going to be as great, but I do think Christian Brown will be taking strides to possibly fulfill what Bruce Brown was doing last year. And when it comes to just the starting five in general, I think the Nuggets have the best starting five in terms of how well they mesh together. And they have the best player in the league, Nikola Jokic. They have Jamal Murray, who just fits as a perfect duo. I think you can make an argument that Jamal Murray and Jokic are probably the best duo in the NBA. And you just have to respect the champions, in my opinion. They're going to be a great regular season team. I think the depth is what's going to possibly hold them back from truly winning it all again this year. But I still do think that they are good enough to make it to the finals again. So I'm going to put them here in the Sigma tier. Moving on into our next team, and we have the Houston Rockets. And despite the moves that they did make, I'm still going to put them into the ant tier. They got Fred VanVleet, they got Dylan Brooks, they drafted Amen Thompson. Tari Eason is going to be taking strides in improvement. Alperen Sengun is also going to be making strides. Of course, Jalen Green is going to be getting better as well. And Jabari Smith is going to be making improvements as well. This is a very young team. These guys are going to get better. They added some veterans to this team. And I don't think that the Rockets are going to be a gulag team anymore. They're trying to make strides as a winning environment, as seen with them hiring Ime Udoka as their head coach. And I think that is good enough for them to make it into the ant tier. But again, this is just a very young team, and despite how high you may think Dylan Brooks is as a player and how much impact he's going to bring for this team, same thing with VanVleet. These guys can definitely help them win games, but the West is just so stacked to the point where I can't see a world where the Rockets make the play-in. If they were to get it, it would probably be the 10 seed. But again, I just think there are better teams. And for that reason, I'm putting them into this ant tier. Moving on into the Golden State Warriors. And I'm going to put the Golden State Warriors into the good, but not great tier. They traded Jordan Poole for Chris Paul. Definitely a more win now move. If you're the Warriors, just looking in their perspective, they felt like they could have a higher ceiling, I guess, with having Chris Paul on the team. But with the team with Steph, Clay, Draymond, Wiggins, Looney, that is a very good starting five. And they honestly haven't shown me to be a completely incompetent team yet. So in my opinion, they made the second round. They lost in the second round to the Lakers. I feel like that is pretty much going to happen again. And if that were to be the case, then yeah, they're going to end up being a playoff team, just not so much contenders. Moving on into the next team, and we have the LA Clippers, and I think I'm going to put the Clippers also in the good but not great tier. It should be noted that I am assuming that everyone is going to be healthy. So if that were to be the case, having Paul George and Kawhi Leonard as a duo is very good. And as we've said for many years, if they are healthy, then they are one of the best teams in the West. But despite me taking into account that, hey, maybe these guys are able to stay healthy the entire season, I just don't think that they are the first or second best team in the West. I just think there are going to be better teams in the West to knock off the Clippers, especially if we just look at the Nuggets. I don't think the Clippers have any answer for a starting lineup that the Nuggets have with Jokic in it. But in terms of just a roster in general, having a duo of Kawhi and Paul George, Westbrook on this team as well, who performed very well in the playoffs and just great depth like they've had the past couple of seasons. If everyone's healthy, then they're going to be a great playoff team. Moving on into the Memphis Grizzlies, and things are definitely weird because Ja is going to be suspended for the first quarter of the season, and because of that, I'm forcing them to be a play-in team. Again, Ja is going to be missing a quarter of the season. They did get Marcus Smart, lost Dillon Brooks in the process. They also lost Tyus Jones, which I definitely do like Tyus Jones, but again, they got Marcus Smart, who I think is a good replacement for Tyus Jones. But this Memphis Grizzlies team is going to be very, very good defensively. And that's something that's really needed because Ja Morant is not that great of a defensive player. But once Ja Morant does come back, I definitely do think that this Grizzlies team is going to be a very solid team. I can see them around the 7th to 8th seed. I don't think they're going to be a lower tier team in the play-in spots, but I definitely do think that they will find themselves in that spot, especially again since Ja is going to be missing a lot of time. I'm also very high on Jaren Jackson Jr. in terms of his just offensive productivity. I think he showed a lot of great signs towards the tail end of last season of becoming a way better offensive player. Really, the only other thing I think he needs to improve on is his rebounding. We saw that in the FIBA tournament, but it's been that way his entire career. But yeah, Memphis Grizzlies in the playing spot, I think this is a pretty fair spot to put him at. Moving on into the Los Angeles Lakers, and this is going to be our second team in the Sigma tier. Yeah, Lakers by far and away won the offseason with how many signings they got. They got Gabe Vincent, they got Taurean Prince, they got Cam Reddish, Christian Wood, Jackson Hayes. They re-signed Austin Reeves to a great contract. Same thing with Rui Hachimura. The entire core is still there. D'Lo, AD, LeBron. This team made it to the Western Conference Finals last year. Yes, they got swept, but they got so much better. And the Nuggets, in my opinion, got slightly worse, especially with, again, how much worse their bench got. So I think the gap between the Lakers and the Nuggets got significantly smaller. I definitely would probably still favor the Nuggets, but if the Lakers and Nuggets were to reach the Western Conference Finals again, I don't think it would be a sweep again, but I'm a big fan of what the Lakers did in this offseason, and because of what they did in the offseason and just how great that they ended up performing after the Russell Westbrook trade last season, I just don't think there should be any world where they aren't one of the best teams in the West, or if they are the best team in the West. I think that could definitely be a real possibility. Moving on into our next team, and we have the Minnesota Timberwolves. I am also going to be putting them into the play-in party tier. Anthony Edwards, I think, is going to really push himself into a superstar this next coming season. And hopefully with Cat maybe having a better, healthy season than he did last year, maybe that can help between the fit between him and Rudy Gobert. And that could really give the Timberwolves, maybe just a better record overall next year. I do like Mike Conley as a lead point guard, but he's just getting older. Jaden McDaniels is a great defender. We'll have to see how much improvement he has on the offensive end, but the defense is definitely going to be there. They also extended Naz Reid. Nickeil Alexander-Walker also has some pretty good upside. I liked what I saw out of him in that first round against the Nuggets, especially as a three-point shooter and a defender. I think this T-Wolves team is going to be really good. But again, I think there's a lot of great teams in this Western Conference. And the fit between Cat and Rudy Gobert, I think, is really going to be troubling for them. And I don't really know how they can figure that out. And for those reasons, I'm going to put them into this play-in party tier. But like the Memphis Grizzlies, I think they will be about that 7 to 8 seed. Next up, we have the Phoenix Suns. And I think I'm going to be putting the Phoenix Suns in the good, but not great tier. Look, this team is super top heavy with Booker, Beal, KD, and Ayton. But outside of those guys, I think this team really falls down a cliff. Yes, the guys that they did sign, I think were pretty good, especially in terms of the circumstance that they were in. They really could only sign minimum contract guys, but a lack of point guard or just like a really good playmaker, I think that's really going to screw up what the Suns can do. The Suns are planning, I believe, to have Bradley Beal as the lead point guard. And honestly, in my opinion, I think it should actually be Booker. But even then, I do still think that the Suns do need a little bit more playmaking, especially coming off the bench. Because, okay, if we're going to start Bradley Beal, you got rid of Cameron Payne. Who is the backup point guard? They surrounded this really top-heavy roster with some really good shooters. I still do think the defense, especially on the perimeter, is going to be suspect. And I think we should really look into what DeAndre Ayton is really going to look like this year, because he complained when he had Chris Paul and Booker on his team that he wasn't getting enough shots. Then they got KD, so he wasn't getting any more shots. And then they got rid of Chris Paul and brought in Bradley Beal, who's going to be shooting the ball more than Chris Paul. What is DeAndre Ayton thinking about this entire situation? I would not be surprised if he ended up being traded later in the season, especially since he doesn't really want to buy into this role of just being a defensive rebounding monster that I think he really can be, but he just truly hasn't really leaned into that. I think he wants to be more of an offensive oriented guy, which is fine, but it's not what the Suns need in this case when you have great scorers just all around you. I think the Suns team is going to be really good, but I still think there's so many flaws for this team. Next up, we got the New Orleans Pelicans, and for me, I'm going to be putting them, and this might be surprising, I'm going to put them into the ant tier. The health of Zion Williamson to me is really concerning. He's looked really good in the offseason in terms of what he looks like physically. I am not doubting that this man has lost weight and has gotten better. And yes, I am still assuming that the Pelicans will be coming into the season healthy, and I'm ranking them based off the health. I still think that they will be a pretty decent team, especially, again, they have Zion, they have BI, they got CJ. Herb Jones is going to improve. They have Trey Murphy. He did get injured, but I think he will improve once he comes back. They have some good pieces on this team, but I think what's really going to hold them back is just the fact that I don't think they made significant enough changes to their roster to be better than any other team that I have above them at this point. And again, I think health can really screw them up throughout the season, whether it is with Brandon Ingram, who had a pretty injury-riddled season last year, even though it wasn't as bad as what Zion was dealing with. But I think health can definitely hurt them at some point in the season. And for that reason, I'm just not too high on this team, and that's why I have them in the ant tier. Next up, we got the OKC Thunder, and I'm going to put them into the play-in party tier. The Thunder were a borderline 500 team. They had an incredible season last year, despite not having a winning record. I think they proved a lot of people wrong. A lot of it had to do with SGA and his jumps into a borderline top 10 player. But with Chet Holmgren coming back, J-Dub looking really good, Josh Giddey continuing to improve in his fit next to SGA, being pretty solid in my opinion, and I think it's just only going to get better. And just this team being young in general, everyone getting better and having a really good culture and head coach as well, I see them making massive improvements this year to the point where I think they will definitely be a play-in team. And in terms of where they stand with all these other play-in teams, I definitely do think that they can fight with these other guys like the Mavericks, Grizzlies, or T-Wolves. I can very well see these guys being a 7 or 8 seed. I would still count on the Timberwolves and the Grizzlies probably being there, but I definitely do feel confident with what the Thunder will be doing this season, and because of how young they are, I think they're set up for greatness. Next up, we got the Portland Trailblazers, and yeah, this is a gulag team if I've ever seen one. Damian Lillard has yet to be traded, so this could potentially change how you may see the Trailblazers. Maybe they are an ant team if Dame continues to play with him despite being traded, but I think once Dame is traded, there's just no doubt in my mind that this is one of the worst rosters in the NBA, and I don't really think I need to explain that. They got Scoot Henderson. I think he's going to be really good. Anthony Simons is a solid upcoming guy as well. But then after that, Jeremy Grant, overpaid. Nurkic, also overpaid and just not very good as well. This Blazers roster is just not good. They're in the gulag, man. Next up, we got the Sacramento Kings, and I am going to be putting them into the good but not great tier. The Kings had a great year last year, and they are pretty much bringing everybody back. I think De'Aaron Fox is going to continue to get better. I think he's just going into his peak of his career. Keegan Murray was a great rookie last year. I think he continues to step up as well into his second year, really solidifying himself as the third best player on this team. Domantas Sabonis, a great center in this league. Mike Brown, an excellent head coach. The Kings had one of the best offenses in the league last year. I think that's going to continue to happen. And while I don't think that they're going to be third seed good like they were last year, because I do think that depending on health, the Suns or the Clippers will probably have a better record than the Kings, I do think that they are on very similar tiers. Because they are so great on offense, I think that's going to lead to a lot of wins, and for that reason, I can see them being a solidified playoff team. And for our last teams, we're going to go really quick on these two. For the San Antonio Spurs, I'm putting them in the gulag. They got Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Victor Wembanyama. They got Jeremy Sochan as well. I think those are some very good young pieces, but overall, this team is just not ready to compete at any level. If you wanted to make the argument that the Spurs are an ant team because of how high you think of Victor Wembanyama, I would totally get that, but this overall roster is just not great, and I do think that Victor Wembanyama, especially in the beginning of the season, will probably struggle, especially offensively. I think the defense will translate, but the offense, I think, is going to definitely need some touching up, and I think it will take a little bit for him to develop that side of his game. And for the Utah Jazz, this is also a very interesting team because I do find myself wanting to put them into a potential play-in party tier because of how well they started last season in the beginning, but then they tailed off because they wanted the tank and they looked really bad. But because Lauri Markkanen is on this team and Walker Kessler is also an up-and-coming player as well, they also got John Collins. I think this team isn't absolutely gulag material. So if I were to put them somewhere, I would put them into the ant tier. You could potentially put them into the gulag if you wanted to. You can throw them into the play-in party tier if you truly think that they're that good. But I think they're good here in this ant tier. They will probably have some really high moments. They will also probably have some very low moments. Well, those are my rankings for every single Western Conference team going into next season. Let me know down below what y'all think. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and sub. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs by the end of the year, so it would mean a lot. You can check out my socials down below in the description. You can also check out this video somewhere on the screen where I went over all the Eastern Conference teams and I ranked them just like we did today. Anyways, I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.